My parents ignored my milestones for my brother's events, so I didn't tell them about my wedding. Now they're publicly shamed and facing divorce. My younger brother is Mike, 21M to my 27F, always grumbling and expecting others to cater to him. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy. My parents hovered over him for everything from birth. Once he was born, my parents totally ignored me. He has no special needs, nor was his a difficult birth. Particularly, my mother, 50F, transformed from a loving mother to one of those boy moms people ridicule on the internet. Though he still loved and supported me, my father, 50M, has always been too cowardly to challenge my mother and let me prevail at least once. My grandfather, 76M, always called my parents out on their actions and never liked my brother. Hence, he was the only one who stuck up for me. Though Grandpa lives on the other side of the nation, so I couldn't see him frequently, I remind him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very unique link. Mike knows our mom adores him and enjoys pushing it in my face. This, and his behavior, have always caused friction between us. He is a horrible human, spoiled, bratty. I'm not even sure how many times I got in hot water for activities I performed better than him or for things he framed me for. His only aptitude is football, which landed him a scholarship to a respectable university out of state. Apparently, my fund had been taken to defray bills after a fire, only for me to find years later that Mike had been given the money to purchase a house and a car. So, my parents paid nothing for my schooling. At public university, I ran across Lucas. I originally found great attraction in him, of course. I met other people who are now my dearest friends. Owing to them and Lucas, my best friend for years before we got together, I was able to move out of my parents' house. Lucas and I both have really good pay now and are well known in our industries. Now, let us focus on the major problem. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. Being very private individuals, we did not broadcast it on social media. My parents laughed off my telling them with a "that's nice." I am beginning to believe they paid hardly any attention to me. We chose to have a modest yet elegant ceremony and celebration among friends and relatives. Though they never answered the invitation, Lucas persuaded me to invite my brother and mom. Every time I went and tried to discuss the wedding without mentioning it specifically, my mother would always talk over me about the adventures and successes of my brother. I once grew bored and stopped my mother to let her know about an event I had scheduled with an unmovable date. She said they wanted to be there, but my brother was playing the last game of the season on that same day, and they couldn't make it. Of course, this preference did not surprise me. They missed my ballet performances and both my university and high school graduations for events connected to him. By now, I wanted to be petty. I told my parents it wasn't a problem for them to miss the event, deliberately omitting the information it was my wedding, and I didn't press anymore. Imagine, a few weeks ago, I was married. It was just beautiful. There was my family, Lucas's family, and our friends. We had an amazing time. It was exactly right, and my grandpa was glad to be giving me away. My cousins questioned me several times about the absence of my parents. I told them straight out they couldn't come since they had a brother's game to attend. They looked at me a few times. My grandpa seemed obviously upset for a little while, but otherwise, nothing unusual happened. Lucas and I traveled for our honeymoon after the reception, and we were phone-free during the vacation. Once we returned, though, we found a storm waiting at our house. Turning on my phone, I couldn't even open it before a flood of alerts erupted. Most of these came from my mother and brother. Mike called me all kinds of awful names and insulted me since, apparently, one of my paternal aunts uploaded pictures of the wedding on Facebook and tagged them with a very clear dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the ceremony. The message went seemingly viral in my parents' neighborhood, and they have been publicly humiliated for mistreating me. My grandfather also personally went to see my parents to face my father, his son, embarrassing him to the point of tears. This looked to be the breaking point for my father. He ultimately revolted against my mother since he was so upset by missing the wedding of his only daughter and his father's criticism. He is now threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I believe this is the reason my mother has been messaging my phone. First nasty and threatening, then absolutely sad, full of pleading and pity parties. I am currently at home with my hubby, figuring out how to handle things. Most of my relatives, including those I invited to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through, claiming they had no idea this was happening at home. Since my grandpa lives on the opposite side of the nation or another state, I cannot attribute guilt to any of my relatives. But since now she is inconsolable at the notion of missing the wedding, my mom's sisters and friends are demeaning me for not telling her about it. Though, I'm not sure personally. I believe she's only starting to save face. The most recent texts from my mother and father seem to be quite depressed and wounded by missing my wedding. My family is split now on 3 fronts. The majority supporting me, my mother's relatives embarrassing me for hurting her emotions, and my mother demanding that I forgive her in view of her efforts at atonement. Reddit ATA? My best friends tell me not to pay attention to them. Edit. I really appreciate your love and comments. It is very overwhelming. Here, I will answer the often asked questions. I did tell my folks about my wedding. All of my guests received conventional paper invites, and I was informed that every invite had arrived at the correct address. From Mike or my folks, I got no response. A few very far-off relatives and several Lucas side associates also ignored it. I messaged every one of them to double-check, and those who hadn't replied said they couldn't make it. When I texted my brother and dad, they never answered. I was left on read. Knowing them and weighing all I had to schedule, I stopped trying to insist. I had already been informed that my brother had a game. Hence, I omitted mentioning the date of my wedding every time I insisted on bringing up my festivities in order to obtain a response. I was constantly told that some things were simply more important than me and not to be pissy or a hassle. By now, I believe it reasonable for me to give up arguing. It was not worth the effort. I did not keep my wedding under wraps. I refrained from telling my parents it was my wedding to see whether they would show the least bit of interest, but surprise, surprise, they did not. Still, I told my relatives and uncles straightforwardly about my wedding. Sometimes my mother was on the phone. Other times, she was just conversing with other people. She was in the room a few times when I discussed locations or dress stores with my aunt. She never paid attention. When I brought it up, she grinned and said, "That's great, dear." At reunions, then would switch the topic. From Dad and Mike, radio silence. I stayed in touch with them because every time I tried to go no contact in earlier years, I was harassed, always for reasons involving my brother. I attempted after my high school, bachelor's, and master's graduations, which they never bothered to show up for. Every time I dared to turn my back on the family, my mother's aunts, brother, parents, and maternal grandparents disgraced me. The turning point in this is that Lucas was not at my side over all those years. We began dating a little after my previous NC try, and now that I have him here, I feel more sure of my position. But I lacked confidence before that. As I said earlier, my paternal side lives on the other side of the nation and was not aware of how my parents treated me. Once, when I was 14, I did try to show my parents. They pretended to be sorry as my aunts, uncles, and grandpa chastised them. But once we arrived home, I was subjected to gaslighting and beating for lying. Following that, I had regular communication with my paternal side but refrained from acknowledging my parents' mistreatment out of anxiety, which, to be honest, still torments me now. Only Grandpa knew, but if he tried anything, he was always under danger from my alienation. I am not from the same city as my parents. They don't know my new address. I live in a city a 1-hour drive from my parents' little town. This is thus because my mother supported my brother, stating siblings share their belongings, after he tried to break into my apartment in search of some money. I moved now and will be cautious not to let them know where I live. Before he even began high school, my parents bought my brother a house and a car. Instead, for his 16th birthday, they purchased him a house close to his college and a car. He started his freshman year. They simply lied to me and utilized my money later for my brother, saving it for later on. They did not use it straight away. Update 1. To those who thought my story was false, let me remark that to the extent of considering my reality as a fantasy, your family life is better than mine. However, if you would quit sending DMs and bothering me under the pretext of me fabricating a tale, it would be much appreciated. I was overwhelmed and bawling my eyes out from the abuse of my family. Thus, I overlooked a few specifics in the original message. Although you are not compelled to believe my account or follow it, I would like the least degree of politeness maintained. Before delving into the update, let me also clarify a few points. Indeed, the invitation said clearly it was a wedding. No justification. My mother's side of the family skipped the wedding. I apologize for not making that obvious in the first post. Most of them were occupied. The others only offered me gifts or reasons, but did not show up. That is exactly what I mean. It's not like I live in their thoughts, so don't ask me why they didn't talk about my wedding with my mother. The fact that my mother sent an SMS apologizing serves as her atonement. Let me now turn to the update. This past week, things have been a little wild. I went off Reddit for a few days to sort through my ideas. I then spent a lot of time discussing with Lucas how to go forward. He has been my rock. I could never love him more than I already do. Though my parents were always a forbidden subject, he gave me a hard reality check I really needed. We came to the conclusion that my constant contact, sticking around, and inability to go no contact is not healthy. I now see that my lack of complete participation in NC stemmed from deep down, even now, merely wanting their approval. Pathetic, I know, but it feels like a drug being with my folks. Until they are not, they can be loving, humorous, sympathetic, and warm. Their small love makes you want more and drives you to ruin yourself in great need of their praise. That is sufficient, though. I told myself that things will evolve. After some contemplation, I decided to start therapy and to avoid all people who raised concerns about this matter. For good this time. After spending a day thinking about how I felt, I messaged my father to let him know I would meet Mom, Dad, and Mike in a neutral area the next day, should he want to discuss. He answered instantly and agreed. We convened at the park, and for damage control, my father's sisters and brother joined us. Looking troubled, as if he had been crying for some time, was my father. Though my mother looked the same, I believe it was more out of shame and resentment. My brother gave an irritated glance. I informed the three of them how their behavior and inclination for my brother constantly upset me, and how their violent behavior made me realize I wanted no more interaction with any of them following that conference. My mother attempted to cut me off several times, but my aunt, the Facebook post author, shut her off every single time. They didn't know what to reply when I questioned them why they treated me this manner. My uncle chastised my father for his continuing tears and apologies without response. Though in the end, she merely declared she simply hated me, plain and simple, my mother seemed as if she was asking herself that for the first time. Regarding my brother, he merely enjoyed the attention and made me miserable as some sort of sport. I continued to ask questions. They claimed to have never gotten an invite when I queried why they never answered it. When I showed them the books, they denied getting them. As it happens, they hadn't actually gotten my wedding invite. It vanished from their residence when it arrived. My brother, who had come visiting for the weekend, was the only one in the house. As many of you would have imagined, he tore up and wrecked the invite. Then he erased the messages when I texted my parents. He said it was easy, as they kept my conversation preserved and omitted the notices. My parents thus never received an official invitation at all. I was simply upset. When I questioned Mike about why he would do that, he simply shrugged and said it wasn't as crucial as the other things they had scheduled anyhow. I had to stop Lucas from punching him in the face. Oddly enough, my folks were agitated and began chastising him. I have to admit that I was partly happy since he started to have a tantrum and scream crocodile tears. Then my mother said that everything was settled and that there was no need to wrangle over a misinterpretation. She indicated it was time for me to clear their name. That started me, so I stopped her and told her they were not forgiven at all. Mike wrecked the invite, but that did not imply that all their carelessness was immediately annulled. And all that time I was clearly having a wedding, they ought to have inquired about it. Are you curious about the reaction of my mother? I did hear you talking about a wedding of yours, but I just thought you were being delusional and seeking my attention with exaggerated scenarios, she stated. She was sure Lucas would never marry me and didn't really like me. Do you trust me when I tell you I was ready to trash her face? Another issue surfaced. My brother apparently had hardly any football games to choose from. To create a narrative to dodge my event, my parents exploited the knowledge my husband, friends, and I know little to nothing about football. We prefer soccer. And the fact I stopped asking about it when Mike would mock me during his time in high school. Since Lucas and I are blocked and my brother has private social media, I couldn't verify or refute the existence of a game when I originally posted. I took stupid faith in my parents' words. No, though, you're interested in where the man-child disappeared to? Mike wanted to go, hence they visited Disneyland. They covered for my brother's 100th trip using the football narrative. Apparently, they did this several times during the last few months. By then, I was really burned out and overwhelmed by the volume of data. My blood boiled, and I snapped since I had been misled this terribly. Rising, I informed my father he was a depressed, weak man unable to defend his children until his wife approved of it. I advised my brother he would always live like the parasite he is, babied to the point of uselessness. He is a terrible excuse for a guy who will not achieve anything in life. To my mother, I stated she was the worst narcissist, a pitiful small woman who lacked even deserving treatment or evaluation. For her inactivity, she is too rotten. Thus, even God could not be of assistance. Strong, I know. Halfway through my tirade, my mother shot from her seat to yell at me, but I was too enraged. I yelled at her to close her mouth, take a seat, and listen for once. She became so enraged it seemed as though steam were emanating from her ears. After that, I seem to recall not much except that I kept talking. My anguish and wrath seemed to pour out. I'm very convinced the entire park was silent at one point. Telling my parents and Mike I was disowning them all, and that if they were clever, they would think before reaching out again, I spit at them. Taking my pocketbook, I left with Lucas, Anna, and Francis, leaving my parents and brother at the mercy of my aunts and uncles. The truth of what I had just discovered and spoken eventually struck me at some point, and I had a panic episode on the drive home. Lucas was driving. Anna guided me through it till we stopped in a parking lot to cool me down. I owe them far more than anything. Once home, I just collapsed onto the bed and turned in for the night. Though considering my profession and career, I couldn't expose myself in that way, even though I really wanted to follow your advice and put the entire chat on Facebook. One thing is sharing my tale on Reddit from an unidentified throwaway. The other is Facebook with my identity and face all over. Showing that road was not one I could travel. Rather, I behaved better. I created a folder containing all of my mother's nasty remarks, texts, and insults and forwarded it to the woman running my mother's church. Though my mother worked her ass off to enter, this close-knit community is also somewhat judgmental. Well, that's exactly what occurred. Being rejected by them is like dying. Like clockwork, the scandal started out in the church and quickly extended across the little community. Given my tiny spill, you can see what this implies for my parents. I did discover more texts from my maternal side of the family, demeaning me even more for offending their sister or daughter. By then, I simply didn't care anymore. Following your advice, I informed them they would not be in my life going forward. They can talk as they wish. I just have no interest. Rather, they should be appreciative I do not send their unpleasant texts to their husbands or jobs. I blocked every single one of them, including my grandparents. I did come across a long note from my father. He stated he was sorry for not being strong enough to challenge my mother, agreed what I said was accurate, and couldn't believe he had missed so much of my life due to her. Tired of being controlled, he informed me he was going to divorce her regardless of my choice. He stated he wanted a relationship with me to offset all the years gone by. I did respond to him, saying at the moment I truly do not want to see him or pardon him. He said he loves me and he will do his best to get me back. I answered that, then blocked him too, since I find that hard to believe. Frankly, his slimy approach of attempting to get out from under this issue by dumping my mother under the bus is pitiful. She owned it and at least was hostile. He only blames others for his decisions. Hence, I do not want to hang around people like that. Likewise blocked are my mother and brother. I just blocked Mike as he messaged me more to harass and threaten. My mother gave herself a pity party for her marriage falling apart and for her being outcast by her neighborhood. I simply said, good, then blocked her too. Regarding my grandfather, he has chosen to stay with us temporarily to be at my side. Having perused some of your remarks, he truly is the finest. He won't own that he finds them flatulent. A few days have gone since then. All has been peaceful. Lucas is spoiling me rotten, and I have therapy shortly. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.